comment? Yes, Bethany,
Would you like me to screen share the agenda for everyone to just quickly review?
that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Give me 1 moment.
I see a window that says VTAC, VITAC. Does anybody know what that is?
That's the captioner.
Okay.
Do you want me to turn off my screen? That
Yeah, it's fine.
And we'll have spotlight on Tina. So there's no one from the community, and so we want to think about approving the minutes. I hope you had a chance to read them. We did send them out. Did anyone have a chance? And is there someone who would like to make a motion or comment on the minutes? They are here. I can't control them, so I can't take them down so you can read them. Thank you, Bethany.
Yeah, I can see it fine. Thanks. Tim says I can see it. I'm using gallery, so I have everybody. Tim says I've read them. I make a motion to accept the meeting minutes.
Thank you, Tim. Do we have anyone who would like to second that? Paul, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right. Then we'll consider the minutes passed and we'll go on to our next agenda item. I was so grateful that Sharon came and spoke with us. She was very gracious, and then you may not know that the very next Monday, she announced her retirement.
Yeah.
And,
Wow.
so she took that agency from a real grassroots operation to something to be proud of, and she is now retiring. And so we were her last meeting before she made her big announcement, I think.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
So we'll see who they get to replace her and what that search process will look like. But I appreciated her candor and her ability to give us some of the struggles that they overcame. I thought a lot about it, as I'm sure you did after talking with her, and I'm more convinced than ever that this would be a really good move on our part to work toward establishing an organization here in the state that is by deaf for deaf consumers. It may take a while, but I think it is one of the best things we could do to create an agency that would empower deaf adults and educate deaf adults. It's not intended to replace the agencies that we have, but I see it as something that would fill a very big void, a big hole that we have in Rhode Island for deaf adults. Tim?
I'm considering something like, like the horse and the cart, which comes first. So I feel like maybe we need the cart first because, the funding opportunities right now aren't really clear. But if we set up an organization soon, we could maybe have more potential opportunity when something comes up to get that funding when there's money available, or, either to get a grant or maybe some other organization over many years has money that they want to transfer to a new organization. So I think maybe we should soon start that process of setting it up. We can start small, figure out how we can add to it. For example, right now, we really need deafblind services and DSPs and SSPs. And, with the right funding, we could really get that started. So, but we could start small enough, the first step maybe, and then we could add other supports, other needs. Did I freeze? Okay, I think he said everything he wanted to say.
I didn't catch the last part. I saw immigration, but I didn't really catch what you said.
Oh, that's okay. I'll repeat myself. I thought we could go ahead with deaf-blind because that's an obvious need that we know we do not have services for. Maybe we could go ahead with that, and later on we could add other services that we clearly need, like immigration. I'm not sure how many, but if that's a small number, we could always keep adding later to grow into a bigger organization to fully satisfy all, well, I don't know about all, but most of the needs.
I agree. I think we need to start with the cart. But at the same time, I think we need to do a survey of needs, a needs assessment to really poll our constituents and find out what they are familiar with Deaf Inc., some of them, and we could describe that we are trying to figure out where there are needs that we're not aware of, because we may be surprised. There may be something that our consumers want that we haven't even thought of, but I do think a combination of setting up a board, because you can't get a 501(c) without a board. So you'd have to set up a board, begin the process of establishing a 501(c) so you could go after grants. And maybe even RIDE has the adult education grants. We might even be able to go after one of those, at some point. There are also other organizations that are not related to RIDE that over the line in Massachusetts that work on citizenship and English as a second language kind of goals. And they may have some grants that we're not aware of that we could go after, but you have to have your 501(c) status first. So I do think having a board but then you have to be able to figure out where the needs are. So at the same time that we're buttonholing people and trying to convince them to serve on a board, people in the deaf community are all already stretched so thin, some of them. And so we want to be careful that we pull in people that are, you know, that have time and commitment, and start the 5013C. At the same time, I think this committee could be developing a needs assessment that could go out to consumers. That's what I was thinking, parallel activities.
I'm curious, Ernest. Tim saying, I'm not sure if we have a formal needs assessment, but the commission did get people we've captured their concerns, and people who need help with specific things. Is there something that you've noticed, Ernest, that is the most needed? Most of the time so far, it's working on getting SSI, getting vaccines, those kinds of things. But mostly is related to employment and interpreters. There's really not a lot of talk about other things. Most important is interpreters and getting unemployment and the vaccine and healthcare. Those are the kinds of issues. You know, they haven't talked about more education or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't see those as, I think those are things that the commission is appropriately addressing. I would think maybe we start with deafblind as Tim suggested then, and we talk about trying to create a support system of services for deafblind adults, where workshops could be held, people could be trained, events could be made more aware of how they could be more accessible to deafblind participants. But this is an education subcommittee, so we always have to be thinking about that as well. It's not the employment subcommittee. It is, I really see this organization, whatever we call it, as an organization that will come out of this and eventually will serve many purposes for deaf adults.
Yeah.
Switch interpreters.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tim,
And-
your comment about Spellman, was that something you wanted to discuss? These,
Tim said, I don't know if I'm ready to discuss it at this point, but the thing about Spellman, it's the Spellman Center. It used to be based, I think it got established 10 years ago, and they had funding available. I didn't mention how much, but I understand that there is money available. And its purpose is to create a community center to provide education, advocacy, support for the deaf community. But it has not been active for quite a while. If we set up a nonprofit organization, we could meet with them and find out if it were possible to have the Spellman money transferred to this new organization. And it, again, I may be jumping the gun with that. I don't want to speak ahead of, you know, what we've got planned.
Do you know if their 5013C is still alive? The Spellman Group?
Yes, both of them are saying yes, Tim and Ernest, yes.
So
They
they've,
have a full board. Oh,
they've been filing annual reports to keep it going?
I think the last time that they had, it was a 990. There was like 170,000 or something that they had funding. I'm not sure of more recently, but at that point, it's public information. It's out there. So yes, we can access it.
Hmm.
I just, I usually look in the GuideStar database and then I can find some of it. but the information is usually dated. It's 2 or 3 years old.
Mhm, mhm. Do you think that whoever those people are that are still in control of the Spellman organization, um, do you think that they are interested or they might be interested in continuing that work under a different group? Or do you think they're going to want to revive their group?
I've actually wondered, it's something we should meet with them maybe, because somebody passed away. And my understanding is in their estate planning, they donated funds to create Spellman as a, is it a foundation? Now I'm trying to think of the name of the official name of it. So I don't know legally if there's a requirement that they have to keep that operating under that person's last will and testament or something. We'd have to question them more, whether or not they even are free to do such a thing. We could talk to the board and find out what their future plans are here on in and what they would do, because there might be some restrictions on what their potential is.
Do you feel like we could invite them to our next meeting and ask them to give us a history of the Spellman Center and then let that lead us into some questions?
Tim saying, I'd like to have Ernest respond to that too. 1 second, now he's back. Ernest, Nancy is saying, what we were thinking about inviting them to come. And Ernest is saying there's Ernesto. My understanding is he's the person. Ernesto. So that would be funny. Ernesto could come and talk for
Sure.
us here. And we could ask if he would be comfortable to do it.
Is Ernesto deaf?
Oh, yes. Yes, he is. His last name is O something.
Oh, I know him. I know.
Okanari.
Okwara. Mhm.
He's very involved still with the Disability Commission. I think he's on the Disability Commission perhaps. But he wasn't as involved like with the deaf community in the past with the Disabled Persons Commission. And my suggestion would be not so much to invite him to this meeting, but to set up a meeting specifically to discuss the potential of a future. I think if we invite him here, that might be a little too forward or something, but it might be nice to set up some sort of a meeting to investigate that option.
And who
No,
would?
build the relationship to begin with and then move forward from there.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. The only reason I asked is because if they were interested in moving their 5013C to someone else, then we wouldn't have to go ahead and apply again for a 5013C. But now that I know it's Ernest, I know that that might be difficult. So I think it's probably better if we go ahead and think about starting our own. And I say our own, the royal we. I understand that this will be deaf driven, although it is interesting that Deaf Inc. on their board, a certain percentage have to be deaf, but they do have hearing people on their board. Not working in any of the positions, but on the board.
I haven't looked at the board membership. My understanding is the majority, if not all, majority is. And there are some hearing people, usually those people are connected to the deaf community. Either their parents are deaf, or they're a spouse or partner of a deaf person. They have some connection to the deaf community themselves. They're not just, general members of non-deaf communities.
I think if you look in the minutes, I don't have them in front of me, it has the percentage there. It was pretty high, I remember, maybe 60 or 70% deaf on the board, but all the positions in the organization are held by deaf and hard of hearing individuals.
It was 51%.
51, okay, thank you. I thought it was higher.
Tim's saying, I'm wondering, Pam is here. Do you know any more history about the Spelman Center? It's before my time, before I became involved and even moved to the East. And Pam's saying, I only know some superficial information. I think it was part of the RIAD, the Association of the Deaf. I believe they shared an office together. I'm not 100% sure of that, but then they operated a program that was for deaf adults about literacy. And it went pretty well for several years. And I recall babysitting some of their students, their kids, while the parents were taking the classes in literacy. And it happened at Brown University. That went on for a while. But I don't know. I think that's maybe the numbers dropped off. Maybe not as many people were signing up for it because it was a good program back then. Spelman was offering different kinds of services, not just educational, but then it's that the ASL literacy, the English literacy fell away. It would be good to hear more about the history. I don't know fully the whole story. Thank you, Tim saying.
There is a plaque in our glass cabinet here of a teacher, Mr. Spellman, who taught here for many years. And I was told that it was named after him. And when I came here, it was already almost kaput. I believe they lost RIDE funding. They used to also have RIDE funding for adult ed, and they lost it because they didn't do the paperwork correctly. And some of the criteria changed. But I know in this building, it had a bad reputation when I came on board. People felt that it had a great purpose, but it didn't always follow through. That's what I was told when I came here. And within about 18 months, I heard it had closed. And I've been here now 9 years almost. So I don't know the history, but I think you're right, Tim. It probably would be best if 1 or 2 people befriended Ernesto and really began to get the history from him. I don't think I'm the right person for that, but maybe you could be, or Ernest could be, or Pam. And see if he has plans for that money. And who are the officers listed in the 5013C? There has to be more than one person, or the 5013C would not be legal, right? So.
Again, I think it'd be better to have a small meeting and move forward from there before actually inviting anybody from there to hear.
Mhm.
especially with the history in the community in the past, it hasn't always been a positive history. So I just feel like we would need to kind of rebuild the bond, move forward from there, and hope if we could collaborate with them, something was available. I mean, there have been good people associated with it. And then it got, I don't know, a bad rep from, it was a few years before I came to Rhode Island that I remember hearing about it. And I remember coming into Brown and hearing that it had closed the literacy program because Brown University housed it. They used to offer free space, I believe, or reduced cost space for the literacy, and the funding got lost. My understanding is, so then they weren't housed at Brown anymore. But the full story I never really got. I don't know the exact details. I mean, what you and Pam are sharing is new information for me. Pam is saying Ernest might be a good person because he is a new face. He could meet with Ernesto and at least have that dialogue. Ernest is saying, yeah. I mean, I could do that. I can certainly do it. I had been in touch with him here and there to just chit chat, but I can follow up because we have some sort of a base. After this meeting, I could touch base with him and see if he'd be comfortable thinking about, because the funding I know is still there. The Spelman is still there officially. And whether they could transfer to a new organization or if they even have that ability, we can clarify that. I can get more in depth. If you feel like it's worth moving forward, I can set that up and talk to him, explain, find out first of all what his vision and plans are, and whether he'd be interested in transferring it or whether he wants to keep the name Spelman and maybe have a new director, a new board, some sort of team that's working in new directions. So I can at least feel him out on that. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good first step. Thank you, Ernest. I think that's a good first step. We have to know the history and we have to know the status. But at the same time, we should go forward with a needs survey, needs assessment. And we should be trying to identify, I think, our deaf-blind population. Maybe you already know who they are. I don't. I have one student that I would say is going to be a deaf-blind constituent for us. But I do think we need to know where that community is, and maybe we could do a needs assessment that surveys and tries to get a census of how many people we have that are deaf-blind who would want to weigh in on services. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. And Tim's saying, one idea I have that I've been thinking about would be to contact different organizations that provide advocacy, social services, and see if they have ever had a deaf, hard of hearing, deaf-blind person come into their organization or need services at their organization. And I'm wondering if I could at least collect that from those services, because I think it's harder to do outreach to the actual consumers in the community. But social service organizations, they're like the frontline people who are in contact. They might actually know about homeless organizations, immigrant services. For example, at Brown, we've partnered with Bright, the Bright Center, BRYTE, and they provide tutoring for students. They're university students. A lot of them are going out to work with immigrants and refugees, and they might have some refugees who are deaf or deafblind. And, a lot of times I talk to them about connecting them to the Rhode Island School for the Deaf. I don't want people to fall through the cracks, but that's an example. We hear about that. And sometimes students at the school will tell me about that. So that could give us a little bit more of the structure that we need too.
Am I wrong to think that the deaf community would, if we put out an appeal to the deaf community and said, we are trying to identify our deafblind constituents. Do you know of anybody, or could you get this survey to them? Do you think our deaf community would help us identify some of those people?
Ernest is shaking his head. He's saying, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like a lot of deaf people will never, they're in denial if they are losing their sight. They're embarrassed or whatever. I know only maybe 25, less than 25 deaf blind people who live here. It's not a very large group. But, you know, we did do like a program to support them. And a lot of them are feeling like they're very frustrated. There's not that many services. They've talked about SSPs. That's the thing they always say that they need the most. You know, in Massachusetts, we have an excellent SSP program, and we want something like that in Rhode Island. You know, that's the kind of thing I hear. They feel like their needs are not being met in the same way as Massachusetts is. And we have to figure out how we could set up an SSP program to get funding the way DBCAN and DBCC have done. But, you know, what ends up happening is a lot of people aren't comfortable going out, I meant people who aren't comfortable answering those questions, identifying themselves as deafblind. That I feel like they'd be put off. I think it would be hard to get exact information from a questionnaire about whether they themselves are, because people don't self-identify.
I guess my concern is that if we're going to start any kind of a small organization, we can't start by being all things to all people. We have to figure out what our initial focus would be. And Tim had suggested deafblind, which made sense to me. And maybe those 25 is where we start. But that would allow us to set up a 5013C and go after some grants, and maybe set up a regular training program for SSPs, SSPs. And I just think we're very small state, and we have very few worker bees. So we have to have a narrow focus in the beginning, and then begin to expand once we have a name, and we have a proven track record that we've been able to do something. I can foresee the future for an organization like this in Rhode Island being very important, and even eventually having its own place with a community center, you know, where people can come for events. And I can see my mind starts going into wonderful places, but we have to start with some very practical needs and be successful with those first.
Yeah. Tim is saying, the big needs, like obviously we have needs, you know, deafblind. I know many immigrants that are here who have moved here, and that community is growing as well. That is one place we could start working. You know, like that's definitely underrepresented in an underserved group. And I already have, like, we have a senior citizens group that gets together. You know, we don't really have a community center. They use a church or a building somewhere. They don't have their own place, but they do have a gathering place. And many of the deaf youth, maybe under 25 or 30, you know, they're just disappearing, and that's a big group, and we just don't know what's happening to them or where they're going. So, you know, after graduation from the School for the Deaf, we don't necessarily know where they go.
Those that are working, we can tell you what they're doing, but there are some that we lose track of because they're not working. And Yeah, there's so many needs.
Definitely. Yeah, you're right, Nancy, said Ernest.
I think about the need for citizenship classes in ASL and, or even for those who don't use ASL, we're now meeting more parents who are deaf, who are arriving to our school with their children, and they are deaf, but they don't have any sign language. They don't have any structure. And so helping those adults to get signed, they're not comfortable going to a class with hearing people. They really would love a class of deaf people to learn how to sign. And some of them, they are hard of hearing, but they only speak Spanish. They don't speak English, but they're hard of hearing and they really don't have a community. So we now have 3 families like that. That's pretty recent. So
Wow, Ernest is saying, wow.
we have one that just showed up here 2 weeks ago. Heard there was a school for the deaf, and the woman is deaf herself, but never was educated. Now she has a deaf child and has come to this country, and her brother brought her here to register the son, didn't understand the special ed system and just wanted him to start school. And we had to explain that the district, all the paperwork has to be done at the district level before he can be referred. Thankfully, he was referred and he's going to start next week. But we have a mother who doesn't sign and is deaf, and we want to involve her in his education, but how to communicate with her is going to be very gestural initially. So there's a need.
Tim saying, I'm curious, do you know many deaf in Rhode Island right now? Well, we know many who are living in poverty, who don't have jobs, who maybe depend on SSI. And often, they get a letter and they can't read it. And, they don't necessarily understand how the system works, how to get what they need. And so they just need like that kind of independent living kind of services. But I don't know if that's something that OSL does in their work. But, I'm not sure if there's more. I have no idea. So, we don't have the full picture of deaf and hard of hearing community here in Rhode Island. It's very mixed and we're not sure what it is.
That's one thing Deaf Inc. does very well. They have different days of the week where there are people on duty that just read letters for you and help you understand what the letter is that you got from Social Security or whatever. And they have like 2 days a week where they have staff available who you can bring your letter and they will help you figure out, what it means. Important letters. I'm not talking about junk mail. I'm talking about important letters. But that's a wonderful service that they offer.
Oh, that's a good service. Yeah, that's really great. Now there's so many issues with letters, and you get so many things from the government and Social Security and COVID documents and people.
Medicaid,
Yeah,
Medicaid, yeah. It's very easy to make a mistake.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is a good suggestion. That's a very good suggestion, Nancy. Tim said, we haven't invited Margaret Malloy to this meeting, have we, from OSO? Maybe that's something that we should do. We should invite her and ask her what kinds of services they provide. And then we could figure out what they do and what the needs are and fill in the gaps. Yeah, it's Margaret, right?
Yep, Margie. I have a meeting with her tomorrow. You want me to ask her?
Yeah, Ernest is saying, I think that's a great idea.
I think to get there.
Explain to her what our program, explain to us what her program in OSA looks like and what she focuses on right now. Plus working, with the deaf and the
And
Hispanic
isn't
community.
her husband
services.
deafblind? Do I have the right person? Isn't her husband deafblind? Yes. Yes, Paul Malloy. And he works at the Corliss Center, which is another group that we could pull in. They have property and that's not being used. Maybe that could be where a small agency could get started.
I'm saying, I think Commissioner Boonme, she works there at Corliss. Yeah.
Who is Commissioner Boomey?
One of the new commissioners, she just joined during the summer. She joined a board, she's one of the commissioners for the Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, Boonme Osme, I think it is.
Osho, OSHO.
Thank you. Well, I will go ahead and invite her to our next meeting, Margie, and see if she's willing to come. As long as we can keep meeting on Zoom, I don't know how much longer this is going to be allowed, but it is certainly easier to bring people to meetings if they can do it from their home. But it would be good, you're right, Tim, to know what that agency covers. Good for us to get to know what the resources are in the state and begin to pull it all together.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other comments before we wrap up this discussion?
Nope. We're good. I'm curious if John or if Paul or Jen have any comments. Tim said. Okay.
I'm sure, Paul and Jen, you come upon adults looking for work who need basic skills first. I can't imagine that you don't.
Yes, literacy especially.
Yes, I agree. That's a major thing that I see.
The need for literacy skills.
Yes.
Yeah, I think anything that we can do to put resources into that direction would be just beneficial and so beneficial in the long run. It's almost a kind of a foundational issue, in my opinion.
Tim saying before I worked for an organization in California. We got different grants. It's pretty much almost the same as Deaf Inc. actually. And they had some money they got from VR, federal money they got. And it was called Basic Employment Skills Training. I mean, it's called BEST, B-E-S-T. It's kind of funny. And then there was a second one. Gosh, I've forgotten what it was called, but it teaches deaf people how to express themselves better, how to self-advocate through communicating their needs, and also how maybe writing, maybe there was a literacy involved, I think too. But anything related to communication really was what that was about. So that could mean sign, improving your sign, how to write better. It would include kind of be to self more assertive, instead of being so passive and things like that.
I remember going to a training for deaf adults that Deaf Inc. ran quite a few years ago. And it was the difference between being assertive and being aggressive. And it was packed house, and they did skits on how people were able to be successful when they understood how to be assertive and advocate productively as opposed to being aggressive. And it was so well done. And they had different teams running skits, but those are the days when we would travel for those things. Today, everybody wants it on Zoom, you know? So, but those are the kinds of things that an organization could offer. There could be a standard curriculum of workshops that are offered every year, you know, that could be very helpful to deaf adults who don't get that kind of feedback from their families. They don't get that incidental information that makes them more employable or more productive when they're trying to solve resolutions.
I understand Tim says that they actually have a class where students can join ongoing for weeks or months, I think. And when they're done, they actually get a certificate of completion. And that, you know, is to help you get for a job or take the next step, or maybe with a job coach to find a job, you know, to provide advocacy and help them become more independent. So I'll have to think of, there's different models that are out there. You know, I don't know if Rhode Island has one or not. VR money, though, that's a possibility. Said Tim.
She told us that one of her programs is MRC funded. And that's VR money.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We'll ask Margie to come, and we'll continue to, and Ernest, you'll reach out to Ernesto Aquera, and we'll see if the next time we come together, we have a little more information about what's going on and what has historically gone on in Rhode Island. Slow and steady wins the game, right? I think we've departed from the agenda. I don't see it up right now, but I would like to ask you, Ernesto, to present your quick little summary, what's going on with the commission, and give us your report.
Sure. I'll be brief. The Education Committee, I'm working with Mike Baer, focusing on vaccine timelines, and we're working with the Department of Health to make sure that we have access for vaccinations. We've already gotten a lot of people who've complained, deaf and hard of hearing both have been complaining about communication barriers with the vaccine sites, because they get there and then they can't communicate, but they have to register and they don't know how. And the process of the vaccination, and when they're done, what do they do after? Should they rest for 30 minutes? Or, you know, what you do about your second dose? There's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of struggle. So, for example, a deaf person arrives there, there's no interpreter there. Or if a hard of hearing person comes, they can't necessarily communicate on the phone because there's noise, and, you know, you can't really just hear. It's not like a direct communication with a nurse or anything. There's just so many people. It's too loud. So there's a lot of struggle for communication. So we are working with the Department of Health to how to set up a fully communication. So when the deaf people arrive, they feel ready to get in and they feel confident in the process. So that's something that we've been working on, and just trying to figure out what kind of communication access we can provide for all deaf and hard of hearing. So that's one thing. So we are using VRI for that. We'll have iPads, or also live interpreters and CDIs both. So they can interpret there at the sites. Or another option is to use we have a lot of we have several iPads. And so hard of hearing people, when they arrive, they could use that and it would hear the person talking and give them text. And also for the vaccinations, to have a picture model storyboard. So if you don't know how to sign, you would have a picture that you could point at to represent what you needed the person to do. So those are 4 different options that we're talking about at the vaccination sites. And so we want to make sure that if anybody arrives, they have full access. So we are working with them on that. Also, we're trying to figure out which locations to put that at. Like in the local, like Cranston, I can't think of the name of the place. It's like something about socks. It's a big long name of a road.
Saconaset.
Saconaset.
Yeah, that Saconaset. Yeah, I can never say that word. But you know, at that place, you know, if we did it there, a lot of deaf and hard of hearing people could go there. And hard of hearing people are telling us that that location, there's so many people and it's just crowded and they just don't, there's no way they can communicate. They need a smaller place with less noise. So we've talked to the Department of Health saying that deaf people, hard of hearing people, I'm sorry, don't like the Cranston site. We're also working on how to recruit deaf and hard of hearing to go and different strategies. You know, do you need a ride there or can we get you a small place to go to? So the Department of Health is saying that, you know, they're not really going to be able to do something so small. They really want to be able to do large where they could have thousands of people. So, you know, they don't want to bring the vaccine to smaller places. They, you know, want to be able to vaccinate as many as possible. So, you know, they asked, you know, like with the COVID test, like we had done, we had less than 50 people show up. That wasn't enough. So they'd prefer that if we were setting something up for deaf and hard of hearing, that we'd need to have a lot of people show up. And so we'd probably have to have deaf and hard of hearing and hearing people, you know, so we had higher doses than just a couple hundred. So we're in discussions about that, how to let the deaf and hard of hearing community know that we have interpreters and all that accessibility ready for them. So we're thinking about that, and we are planning on using a private link for registration, meaning that when they give us the link, we will send that out just to deaf and hard of hearing organizations, Rhode Island School for the Deaf, RIAD, other places, OSL, anything that anyone that has deaf and hard of hearing, you know, constituents. And so we want to make sure that we'll get people to share and that they can register through that link. It'll be a private link. It will not be for the public. It'll just be internal. So then they could fill it out and they could identify which would be the best day and time so that they can go and show up and we can provide interpreters for a great number of people. If we provide interpreters, you know, maybe we'll have, you know, if we get only 5 or 10 people per day, that would be a waste of money. So we really want to make sure we get a high number of people from the deaf and hard of hearing community to show up. So we don't waste, we can't have interpreters there every day and have one person show up with their, you know, interpreters just waiting. So that's not going to work. So that's really a waste of money. So we're trying to make sure that we can get the interpreters plenty of work by having lots of deaf and hard of hearing people show up. So that's what we're going to do with this private link that we will share. And then we can register deaf and hard of hearing people, send it to the Department of Health and figure out which date and time would be the best. And then let people know. And so they could show up at a specific time with interpreters there. But also we know that some people want to call for registration, and they did set this up. When you call for registration, you'll notice there are 2 languages options. One's English and the other is captioned. So you can call in English.
I think another spoken language is what? Another language. If
So-
you need interpretation in another language, you can show that in a menu item.
And so we'll be able to schedule those people and get the ASL interpreters to show up for the vaccination site. So that would be really nice, to give people an option, you know, and if they want to call and register and they need another language like ASL, then they would say, okay, we'll provide an interpreter. So that's really nice. So there's a couple of different options, the private link that we could send out to the organizations and know exactly which day or times, or people can call and register and tell them they need an ASL interpreter, and they will try to figure out the schedule for when you should come. So right now we're working very hard on that and trying to work everything out because, you know, the process has already started and everybody wants to go get their vaccinations. So, you know, we're trying to make sure that communication access is set up and that when people arrive, they feel more comfortable and confident without feeling they have to struggle or be frustrated because, you know, we've heard a lot of stories from deaf and hard of hearing people saying they're struggling and they're very frustrated, that there's no communication. And some of the healthcare workers have an attitude and kind of give them a facial expression when they realize they're deaf. Plus, this is the military. So, you know, they feel a little bit scared and, you know, not sure of themselves, you know, deaf and hard of hearing people both. So we want them to have a positive experience and arrive and feel comfortable to get the vaccine. So that's really what I've been working on for vaccine sites. Thanks.
My son just told me that when he went to get his vaccination in California, if you were deaf or hard of hearing, they would move you to a desk and there was a computer showing that you would press and it would show a video in ASL of what was going to happen. You're going to go to station 1 and you're going to do this. You're going to go to station 2 and then station 3, you will rest for 15 minutes. Station 4, you will get your appointment. And he said he saw people using that and it was just a preview, but it helped people understand what the process was, you know, and they would just play it on the computer screen. I thought that was short and sweet, you know, but at least it's a help.
That would be very helpful. I think that's
We can
something
switch,
that
you know, we're, sorry.
Ernest might want to think about. Definitely.
So if a deaf person
Ernest is
showed
saying,
up,
yeah, that's something that we've been talking about with BRI. So that, I mean, you're talking about a video loop. That's actually another idea, but I was thinking of BRI. So the iPad would be there. Mike Bear has already got that set up so that, you know, he's talking to Linkwabee about how they could have immediate access to a live interpreter on screen.
Mhm.
So if a deaf and hard of hearing person had a question, they wanted clarity, or they didn't understand the registration process, or they didn't know what they were doing, you know, if somebody's checking in with them there at the 15-minute period, the loop doesn't give them that interactive. So, you know, they've been told whatever, now they don't, oh, I don't get that, and they can't get a repeat. So BRI would be a benefit there, to have an iPad set up where they could ask the questions and somebody could actually interpret. I think it would be a successful thing. I mean, the short and sweet thing, it's only 15, 20 minutes. And so to have a live interpreter would be great, but it's a funding issue because you've got a lot of time where you're putting an interpreter there physically. Whereas BRI, they're not there for 3-4 hours. They're there for the 10 minutes that deaf person needs, and a few hours later, another 10 minutes. You know, we might be 3 or 4 months in with this vaccination process, and we want to make sure that it goes smoothly for all the deaf and hard of hearing people to take advantage. And Tim's saying, I think there'll still be people getting vaccines next year. Like they'll finish this group in July and maybe people will be up for booster shots or something and up to 2022, who knows? And Ernest is saying, well, we aren't confirmed yet whether after your second shot, you're done and you're good for good. And Tim's like, big question mark, no idea. Pam Zellner's saying there's one that and I can't remember if it was Pfizer or Moderna saying 6 months. that they can guarantee the immunity, and after that, you might need a booster. That's possible. So there might be a whole other round of vaccines. And Tim's saying, like with the flu shot, you have to go basically annually, but you can go to Walgreens or CVS and just get a really easy flu shot. That might be what COVID boosters like. It won't be like this military thing with the National Guard there for the next round, hopefully. And Ernest is saying, that's my report. It's mostly vaccines, obviously.
Well, I want to compliment you. People have really been noticing how busy the commission has been around this vaccination business. And people have been really, really complimenting the commission, saying that some of the workshops you've had and some of the meetings have been so informative. I just really, hands waving. It's really, you've been doing some really great work in the community. Been very visible.
And we're not done. We couldn't do it without the staff, of course. So we always owe it to them.
Yeah.
Pam is here, so I want to give kudos to her too.
So is there any new?
Really nice to hear, Nancy. It's great to
Yeah.
hear.
Oh,
feedback.
yeah, very, very positive. That's what I've been hearing. Is there any new business that anyone wants to bring forward?
I don't, Tim's saying, I'm trying to remember. I hadn't mentioned it, but we were talking about at Rhode Island College, the new interpreter training program that's going to be focused on medical. That's coming up pretty soon now. It's supposed to launch this summer. And I'm wondering if it's something we should discuss. It is related basically to education in some way. And the other thought I have, I'm just wondering, we've been focusing on, schools K to 12. And I'm wondering with college, university, there are some deaf people who are taking even graduate work and other college classes. And I'm wondering how their experience has been, whether they've had any problems or they need more support from the commission, from the ed committee. And maybe we could contact some of the post-secondary places and see what they need. I'm just wondering, just to bring it up for discussion, it might be some sort of forward, future action.
Do you mean the disability services department at each of the schools? Is that what you're thinking? Or are you thinking contact students themselves?
Wow. I had actually just been thinking, I hadn't given it that much thought to even think, how many people are in college? I'm thinking of one person that I know of, but I don't know how many other deaf and hard of hearing people are there. And are they facing any challenges? Do they get the right accommodations? Or are they really having a hard time? They're struggling. They feel like their work is limited, because of it. Are they getting card? Are they getting qualified interpreters? Are they satisfied with the services they're getting? Are they able to continue their studies successfully with those supports and services in place? I just thought it would be worth looking at and getting some information about that. We could go through the disability organizations or ask out in the community. Yeah, Ernest has got his hand up.
Ernest?
So the other thought I had, Tim brought up, is about the interpreter program launch that Rhode Island College is doing. And we have spoken about that more. If the commission could do some outreach to high school students who would be interested in becoming interpreters and do some recruiting there, because we don't have ASL in the classes here in public schools. And I'm wondering if it'd be possible that we could do some analysis about which colleges might be able to set up ASL classes or an ASL club so that younger students would have the motivation to pick it up, learn ASL, and then maybe decide to become interpreters after they graduate. Because what I'm thinking about is our pool is so small. It is so small, and we want to grow that pool. And the new school at Rick, I mean, they say that they've got like 100 students sign up for ASL. They're full because there's nothing in high school or elementary. Nobody is offering those courses in the lower grades. I'm just wondering if it's something we could think about to encourage some of the programs to start ASL clubs in their, K to 12. And then maybe somebody could teach it who's a certified teacher or something like that. Then when the students grow up, they could go to Rick and get an interpreter training program and then be prepared. I'm just wondering, it's just a thought.
Well, RIDE accepted ASL and the legislature accepted ASL as a world language that can be taught in schools in Rhode Island. That was last year. But the problem is I get lots of calls from schools that want to offer ASL, but they can't find deaf teachers. And they really want teachers, but they constantly calling me. Do you have anybody who could teach ASL and who is certified? You have to be certified in world languages for ASL. I think the only person in the state certified at this point is David Maloney. And he works full-time for us, but we pushed him to get that certification and he did. So he's now certified as a world language ASL teacher and a teacher of the deaf. And so I'm really very proud of him. He worked very hard to keep going. And I think he's the only one. But schools call all the time, or they hire somebody to teach ASL and then that person goes out on disability and they can't finish the course for the students because they don't have any subs that can come in. So it's, it's not that they don't want to. URI does have an ASL club of students. They come here every other year or so and do a service project here. But it's that our deaf community is so small and they're working or they don't want to work, one or the other, but we don't have people who are looking for teaching jobs in ASL who are qualified. And I would love to build our community with people who could teach ASL at different levels. We even struggle to get people in the family sign language program at night with families 0 to 3 children. It's hard to find people in this state. We end up hiring people from Massachusetts to do that many times. So it's really a numbers game.
Tim saying, I know at Gallaudet, they set up the masters in language ed, that program, and they expanded. I think there were 60 students I think there were 30 and they doubled because of the need. And I noticed that most of the deaf people, they prefer to work in colleges. I think it's just more flexible schedule that they're able to teach and they have, structure. And you don't have to be like in a K to 12, you'd be disciplining the kids, that kind of thing. So a lot of people prefer post-secondary if they're going to teach. And what you notice is the people who are school teachers in the K to 12 are hearing and they're teaching ASL. And the deaf people who are qualified, maybe the pay is better, but you'll see them in the universities and colleges. If they're thinking about where they're going to put their time, it's more of an investment in the colleges and universities. And I don't know how to increase the interest in the K to 12 for those qualified teachers who are deaf. I mean, there's big classes and, it's interesting. You're thinking about like scheduling every day and having lesson plans and all of that if you're teaching in the public schools. But in a night class or in a day program at the college, it's maybe a 3-hour course once or twice a week or something. So it's more attractive to people to teach at a college or a university. That's what I'm seeing. There is a scarcity, even in college, obviously, we don't have enough. Like URI you're talking about, they contacted us and they wanted me to teach a class. And I was like, I'm teaching at Brown full time. I can't be starting to teach at URI. And they wanted to know if I had another person to suggest. And I was like, it'd be good if they're so far south, URI, it's down in South Kingston. If it were near Attleboro, then we could borrow people from Massachusetts, but nobody in Massachusetts wants to drive all the way to South County.
And Johnson and Wales has a lot of ASL students, but they don't have deaf people teaching that class. That's the ASL Academy gentleman. He's hiring people to teach, and Johnson and Wales has quite a few students in the ASL program. And I keep saying that should be deaf people, that should be deaf people. I believe that it should be good native signers who know how to teach, but we got to find them, and we've got to make it more attractive for them, So I get a lot of calls. I had one today from a student at the Met, which is a high school in Rhode Island. And she's taking her first ASL class right now at CCRI, and she has a deaf teacher. And she is so excited. She said, it's the first thing I have ever found that gives me passion. And so she was interviewing me about what kind of jobs are there out there. If I go to college, what should I study? And I said, we need you in all fields. Deaf people need all kinds of people who sign. You don't have to be a teacher, but I would love you to be a teacher. So I get calls like that all the time, of high school kids who are interested, but teaching is not easy. And will they sustain their interest in teaching? I don't know, but there are kids out there. We just need to really guide them in the right direction, I think. Tim, you said something that I wanted to ask you a question, and now I've lost it. Go on.
Was it about the University of Rhode Island, or was it something prior?
No, I can't remember what it was, but I support what you say. There's just not enough interest in teaching K through 12. It's true. Even regular teachers. But I do want to plug the school while I can. We desperately need a really good deaf social studies teacher next year. So if you know of anybody in your circles who wants to teach high school, it is time for a really good social studies teacher. It's our weakest area right now. And I would love a deaf teacher. One of our deaf teachers is retiring, and I would love to make sure that we hire another deaf teacher who's competent. So if you know of anybody who loves social studies and history and who is certified to teach or could be certified to teach, please send them our way.
I used to be a teacher.
There you go.
Yeah, I used to teach in the old school for the deaf, but not for a long time now. But oh my God, that was like 7 years I taught. And then I thought, no, that's it. High school, no more for me.
Well, maybe you know someone. I'm a good boss, I promise. Maybe you know someone.
Tim's saying that's funny. But yeah, I was thinking the university, URI, I know that they want to set up ASL classes and they want to hire part-time people. And I said to them, that is not going to recruit somebody like an applicant who's going to come from another state or something. Nobody's going to come part-time. And I was thinking that's a huge challenge. If you want to recruit good, qualified, competent ASL teachers, you have to start with full-time offers. You can't be like having them come and have 20 hours. Nobody's going to move to the state for 20 hours of work. That's, so that's something I was thinking from their perspective. They're not ready to make that big step to offer full-time, but I'm like, no, you're not going to attract anybody unless you do that. So we're sort of at a stalemate there. It feels like their perspective and our perspective, they're not ready to commit to put the money in. But if they did it, then it could make it happen. It's sort of like if you build it, then it comes.
Any other new business before we wrap up for tonight? It is already 5:23. All right, just to review, Ernest is going to reach out to Mr. Okwara, and I'm going to reach out to
Pam
Margie.
had a comment. Pam had her hand up.
Pam, I didn't see you. I'm sorry.
Comment. I want to go back to the Spellman thing. I know that our office has an old brochure for John Spellman Center. So if I have an opportunity, I will look for that and I can share that with the committee. Maybe that has more information in the brochure that we can use.
Okay. Thank you all very much. And I neglected to thank Bethany for taking notes. I really appreciate your doing that, Bethany, last time and now again, but thank you so much. All right, good night, everybody. Please take care of yourselves. Get your shots.
I-
Good night.
When is the next meeting?